President Trump's tariffs are taking a toll on America's adversaries. China's export growth slowing to a 3-month low for the month of May. That is over the duties on cargo shipments. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, and Trade Representative Jamieson Greer all meeting with their Chinese counterparts today in London. Trade talks are underway. We learned about this, by the way, from a Truth Social post from President Trump. Now, this is coming after Washington and Beijing both accused each other of breaching the 90-day Geneva Agreement. China granted approval for some rare earth exports ahead of the talks. Listen to Maria asking Interior Secretary Doug Burgum on Sunday Morning Futures about one key issue that could come up today.
Are we supposed to have a fair and practical conversation with the Chinese Communist Party about a trade deal when they are undermining us, trying to kill Americans at every turn?
Agroterrorism you're talking about, this is basically Wuhan COVID, meets agriculture. Those of us from the Midwest know that, Chinese posing as graduate students have done, in Iowa 10 years ago, they were literally stealing seeds out of fields. We have to reverse again the 4 years of just trusting like that every grad student here from China isn't completely aligned with the Chinese Communist Party. They wouldn't get to come here if they weren't. China has, going back almost 3 decades, had a very strategic long-term strategy of cornering the market for critical and rare earth minerals, controlling over 85% of the processing. So whether it's semiconductors, jet fighters, or anything with an electric motor in it, they can really hold the entire global economy hostage now.
Joining me now is Gatestone Institute Senior Fellow Gordon Chang. Gordon, good morning to you. I want to get your thoughts. Of course, part of that discussion, just to let our viewers know, was about those 2 students that were arrested. They were bringing illegally these seeds into the United States, and they could have caused widespread toxic damage to U.S. crops. We don't know what they were doing with the seeds. We just know that they were smuggling in their shoes. But Gordon, good morning. And what are your thoughts on all of this right now as it plays out?
Well, first of all, that fungus attack was not isolated. In 2020, Americans in all 50 states received seeds from China unsolicited. This year, Temu, the online Chinese retailer, sent seeds into the U.S. to U.S. parties that weren't asked for. This is an attempt to plant invasive species in the United States. This is an attack on American agriculture, and especially this fungus is even more deadly because it's a biological weapon. And is a weapon of mass destruction, an attack on U.S. farms. So why are we talking to China about trade when they are attacking our country? And by the way, we already had a trade deal with China. It was announced on May 12th, and China had failed to comply with it. And yes, I'm glad that they're now going to sell rare earths to the big 3 car makers, but they're not selling rare earths to everybody else. I just don't get it.
But, I mean, look, at the end of the day, I mean, remember, President Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping did get on the phone. So the 2 leaders did have a conversation. And one of the things I mentioned in my introduction to you was the fact that we have seen a hit on the Chinese economy because of the tariff fight. President Trump was never wrong in saying that China was a threat. They are. But how do you deal with a threat that also is still intertwined economically with us? I mean, this is the world's first and second largest economies in the globe. So this does have real world impacts on AI. Speaking of the minerals, this has, obviously, there are things that we get from China that we cannot get here in the United States yet. I mean, this is why I think the trade talks are important. And the market has been very upset, of course, by the tariff fight.
Yes, and we do have a period of vulnerability, and it's not just rare earths, but it's pharmaceuticals as well. But we got to remember that the Chinese have got to sell, so they're under pressure as well. And by the way, when we look at their price data for last month, it shows that the Chinese economy is still in a death spiral. It is deflation. 4th straight month, the consumer price index was down. 32nd straight month, the producer price index was down. We have enormous leverage at this point, and I hope that our trade negotiators in London right now are pressing that to the max because we have fewer vulnerabilities than the Chinese think.
Yeah, and we have, I think we do have the wherewithal to make their economy suffer, and I think that is playing out. I mean, we just halted nuclear exports to China. That's according to a new report. Liz Peek has got a question for you. Liz, go ahead.
Good morning, Gordon. American companies are lobbying the White House to lift the tariffs or not reimpose the tariffs on Vietnam, saying that has been a very successful sort of off-ramp to manufacturing in China. In other words, companies are responding, I think, to the White House plea to lower their involvement in China, and a lot of them have moved to Vietnam. But what is your view on that? Because I suspect you don't view that as much of a sanguine move as these companies are presenting.
Well, I like the idea that companies have moved off Chinese soil, but the problem that remains with Vietnam is tariff fraud, false bills of lading, products that are labeled manufactured in Vietnam are actually manufactured in China, and the Vietnamese authorities have been complicit in that. So we have a lot of work to do with Vietnam in terms of compliance. So yes, it is progress, but we need much more progress, because you've got to remember the context for all of this, Liz, is that China's been engaged in predatory trade practices. It's been stealing our intellectual property, and this has become a crisis. And we need to do something important now to solve this, because this really is America's future.
Mm-hmm. The New York Times, Gordon, is out with a new piece. It's called The Secret Russian Intelligence Document, which shows deep suspicions of China. So this is interesting. Here's what they write. They say, Russia's spy hunters are increasingly worried about China's espionage, even as the two countries grow closer. Russia's domestic security agency secretly refers to China as, quote, the enemy. This is according to several reports. They call Beijing a serious threat to the Kremlin. But it's based on an 8-page document obtained from Russia's spy hunting agency that says that basically they believe, the Russians do, that China's spying on Russia's military operations in Ukraine and that they could be preparing to make claims on Russian territory. Now, Vladimir Putin says his country's strategic military, his economic partnership with Beijing is unshakable. Gordon, do you believe that?
Well, the reporting is correct, but we also know that for centuries, the Russians and the Chinese have not trusted each other. What really is important is that Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping see that their country's interests at this moment coincide, and they are cooperating very closely. You know, yeah, maybe the Chinese are spying on what's going on in Ukraine, but Russia has allowed People's Liberation Army officers at the front to view what's going on. So this is official coordination. And by the way, there's something like 200 Chinese mercenaries that are fighting for Russia at this moment. Those fighting age males could not have gotten visas to get out of China to go to Russia without the Ministry of State Security of China knowing about it. So the partnership is getting closer and closer despite Russian concerns about China in the long term. I don't worry about China and Russia in the 2060s. Yeah, they probably are not going to be friends then. But we have to worry about what they are doing at this moment. And at this moment, that partnership is really getting very, very close.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting to see this kind of this break in that, according to the Times. Gordon Chang, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Cheryl.
All right, we'll be right back, everybody.